He was losing consciousness long before anyone admitted it. The corridor outside the trauma bay felt too bright, too clean, too unforgiving for a man who had lived most of his life in the shadows. The SEAL sniper lay on the stretcher like a broken instrument, precision once carved into every breath, now replaced by a trembling that even he couldn't suppress. Blood pooled beneath the dressing on his ribs, slipping through fibers like a quiet reminder that time was the only enemy he couldn't outmaneuver. And yet the argument around him was louder than his pulse. Another doctor stepped over him without making eye contact, exchanging clipped whispers with a senior surgeon. "We're not taking him. The risk profile is catastrophic. Transfer him out." The words hung in the air like a sentence passed without trial. Someone else added, in a tone meant to sound detached but laced with fear, "His vitals are unstable. He won't survive the table. Let special operations deal with the fallout." 20 physicians had examined him. 20 had backed away. Some pretended it was policy. Others masked their uncertainty with technical language. But the truth pulsed through the room with chilling clarity. They were afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being responsible for losing a legend whose reputation made him larger than the institution itself. The sniper heard fragments. His name, his record, his prognosis. He tried to focus, to will his body back into discipline, but the ache in his chest pulsed like a living creature. Each breath scraped like glass. He tasted copper. He felt himself drifting. It would have been easier to let go. But then he heard a different voice, soft but anchored. A young nurse stood near the foot of his stretcher, barely older than the new recruits who once asked him to teach them wind calls. Her hands were steady, though she was surrounded by professionals who had already condemned him. She watched the doctors walk away, shaking their heads, distancing themselves from responsibility like it was infectious. She saw the tremor in the sniper's jaw, not from fear but from humiliation, an emotion he had never worn, even under fire. Her heart clenched. There was something painfully wrong about the way the world treated men like him, hailed as heroes until their broken bodies became inconvenient. She had only been on this ward for 3 months, but even she understood that abandonment left deeper scars than shrapnel. The sniper's vision blurred, but he noticed her. She wasn't retreating. She wasn't hesitating. She stood there as if waiting for something, permission, maybe. Or courage. He tried to speak. Only a rasp slipped out, and something in her expression changed. Recognition, not just pity. She took one step closer and whispered a phrase that struck him with the force of a defibrillator, his call sign. A name only known by teammates, commanders, and the few medics cleared for classified missions. His eyes opened fully for the first time in minutes. The tremor in his fingers stilled, because no stranger should have known that name. And yet, the rookie nurse had spoken it with the accuracy of someone who not only knew it, but carried its weight. The room seemed to contract around the two of them. The departing doctors slowed, glancing back, sensing but not understanding the sudden shift. The nurse leaned in slightly, as if guarding a secret between the living and the dying. "I was told to memorize every operative who ever saved one of ours," she said softly. "You pulled my brother out of the Marja sandstorm 3 years ago. He never forgot your voice when you dragged him through that ruin." The sniper blinked slowly, fighting through waves of pain. Memory flickered chaotic dunes, choking dust, the thud of enemy fire, a wounded Marine he had refused to leave behind, despite orders to pull back. He remembered blood, heat, and a young voice begging him not to quit. The connection was real. The nurse straightened, her breath sharp with purpose. "You didn't abandon him. I won't abandon you." Her words cut through the sterile cold like a promise sharpened by loyalty. In a military hospital, where protocols favored caution over courage, her defiance felt like rebellion. But there was no recklessness in her demeanor, only clarity. She lifted the edge of the soaked dressing and inhaled sharply. The wound was deeper than the chart suggested, the bleeding uncontrolled. Every second was stealing something from him. She knew that if he slipped into full shock, there would be no return. She turned toward the cluster of physicians who had already decided he was a lost cause. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. If you refuse to intervene, then you are accepting the certainty of his death. But I'm requesting permission to prep him for emergency thoracic stabilization. He's alert enough to consent. A surgeon scoffed, masking apprehension behind arrogance. You're a nurse, not a miracle worker. He won't survive the incision. Her face didn't flinch. He won't survive without one. Her refusal to back down unsettled them. This wasn't a desperate family member begging for mercy. It was a trained medical professional calling them out on their fear. The sniper watched them, his breathing shallow. He wasn't afraid of dying. He had made peace with mortality long ago. But dying in a hallway because professionals were too hesitant to try, that struck him like a betrayal deeper than any battlefield wound. He stared at the nurse, searching for something in her expression: assurance, resolve, anything that might justify holding on a little longer. She returned the gaze with unwavering seriousness. "You survived worse than this," she murmured, brushing the dried grit from his temple. "But not alone, so don't try." His chest tightened not from injury, but from a rare sting of emotion he seldom allowed himself to feel. Respect didn't come easily to him, yet he felt it for her instantly. As his vision dimmed again, he felt the faint pressure of her hand around his wrist. A grounding touch, a pledge, and somewhere between the pain and the silence, he realized he wasn't fighting for his own life anymore. He was fighting because her conviction demanded it. The operating theater lights bathed everything in unforgiving white, revealing the truth that paperwork and hesitation had tried to hide. The sniper's body was failing, each heartbeat struggling through a battlefield of internal trauma. The young nurse moved with a calm that belied her racing pulse, guiding the preparation with a precision that surprised even the attending surgeon, reluctantly stepping in. He hadn't wanted the case, but he couldn't overlook how she had forced the matter ethically, professionally, and without theatrics. She secured the Roman 4 line, her movements decisive. Every few seconds she looked at the sniper's face, watching the pallor shift toward gray. He hovered in a fragile space between awareness and surrender. There was something haunting in the way his eyes drifted toward the ceiling, as though he were asking forgiveness from someone only he could see. When the incision was made, the surgeon muttered a curse under his breath. The damage was far worse than imaging suggested. A sliver of metal had punctured deeper than expected, nicking a vessel that now threatened to rupture altogether. "We're losing him," the anesthesiologist whispered. The nurse stepped closer, her hand resting near the sniper's shoulder, never interfering, but silently present. She whispered his call sign again, not loudly, but with the tone of someone pulling a friend back from a cliff's edge. His eyelids fluttered. A faint sound escaped him, a breath shaped around determination rather than despair. The surgeon pushed deeper, fighting the hemorrhage. Sweat collected at his temple. "I need more suction," he snapped. The nurse was already there, steadying the equipment, anticipating his needs with unsettling accuracy. She had studied emergency field surgery in her brother's accounts, absorbing details most nurses never touched. Now that knowledge was saving a life no one else had dared to touch, minutes bled into each other. The surgeon sealed the vessel, then extracted the metal fragment, holding it up like a shard torn from some ancient curse. The operating room finally exhaled, but the sniper's pulse dipped a slow, sinking rhythm. The nurse leaned in, her voice barely above a breath. "You held the line for others. Hold it once more." His pulse steadied. The anesthesiologist stared at her. "What did you say to him?" She didn't explain. Some things were meant only for the one fighting to return. When the final sutures were in place and the monitors evened out, the surgeon stepped back, exhaustion and begrudging admiration crossing his expression. He shouldn't have survived this. The nurse finally allowed her hands to tremble, He did. That's what matters. The surgeon regarded her for a long moment. Where did you learn to push like that? She looked at the sniper, alive, breathing, bruised but undefeated. From the people who taught me courage doesn't always wear rank. Night settled over the recovery ward like a heavy blanket, muffling footsteps and softening conversations into distant murmurs. Sniper drifted in and out of sleep, each awakening filled with unfamiliar quiet. Hospitals were nothing like battlefields, yet he sensed the same vigilance in this place, only here. It wasn't danger. That lingered. It was gratitude. He opened his eyes fully for the first time since surgery, and found the nurse sitting nearby, chart in hand, fatigue etched into her posture. She noticed the subtle shift in his breathing and stood, moving toward him. He tried to speak, the words catching in his throat. She gave him time. Silence settled between them, gentle, unforced, healing. Finally his voice emerged, roughened by hours of strain. "Why did you know my call sign?" She smiled, a fragile but sincere curve. "My brother kept the letter you wrote him. He read it to us the night he came home. You told him that fear was proof of being human, but courage was choosing who you stood for." I never forgot that. He stared at her, the memory stirring something deep inside him. He had written dozens of such letters over the years, but he rarely met the people who lived because of them. "Your brother," he murmured, "he made it out?" She nodded, eyes bright with quiet pride. "Because you refused to leave him." The sniper looked away, absorbing the enormity of the circle that had unknowingly closed around him. He had saved a stranger once, a stranger who had grown into someone with a family strong enough to return the favor without hesitation. "You saved me," he said. "No." She replied gently, "You survived. I just refused to let fate choose for you." The ward door opened, and the senior surgeon walked in with an expression far softer than the one he had worn hours earlier. He gave the sniper a respectful nod. "Your nurse is responsible for you being here." Her judgment forced action when none of us were willing to risk it. The sniper met her gaze again. She looked away, embarrassed by the attention, but he saw her differently now, not as a rookie, not as someone learning the ropes, but as someone who understood loyalty on a level that made even warriors pause. As dawn crept across the windows, the sniper whispered the only words that carried weight this moment deserved. "Thank you for speaking the name I thought would die with me." She rested her hand on the guardrail of his bed. Some names deserve to be spoken when everything else is falling apart. He felt a warmth in his chest, not pain this time, but a reminder that survival wasn't always about strength. Sometimes it was about who refused to give up when the world stepped back. And in that quiet hospital room, with the first light breaking through, the sniper realized something profound. Heroes weren't always forged on battlefields. Sometimes they were found standing beside a stretcher, whispering a call sign that carried someone home.